like to welcome everyone today. I would like to introduce someone really special to me. This is my dad. He is someone that has been my mentor on a lot of things in life, and I am here to have a conversation with my dad and ask him a lot of questions. He's one of the main reasons why I am here today, and am able to offer you something in life that has really impacted my life and those people around me. And I wanted to have a conversation with him and be able to share his knowledge and his understanding and talk all things health. This is my dad, and will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, first off, I'm your dad. So it would make sense on one of the main reasons that you're here today. I think another thing you might be referring to is, at age 3, your mother and I got a bit of a surprise in learning that you had acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And that's a big part of my healing journey, and I know yours too. I'm sure we'll loop back to that. But I've been in medicine for, professionally, it's been my career since 1990, but a passionate topic of mine really since I was 12. So like Nicole, I had an illness very early in life that taught me to cherish health. And so I have up here on a shelf an essay I wrote in high school about the type of medicine that we're going to talk about today. So it's been something that's been part of me for a long time. I practiced a family wellness practice really for the first 10 to 15 years of my practice. Then Nicole became ill, and I went searching for answers. How did she develop this right under my nose? And how come I was not prepared to help her and had to lean on other physicians to be able to do that? One of which, we're filming this in Las Vegas, and one of the physicians was Fuller Royal, who's a homeopathic physician. And when I got him on the phone, we were in the hospital with her, he just laid out the roadmap. He knew exactly what to do, kind of took charge even over the phone, and we coordinated with them in the hospital, and then we ended up going to see him. And she's this well person before us today. And that really just changed my whole trajectory in medicine. I wanted to have answers like he did. I realized I had a very limited tool set and a very limited understanding as to how the body worked, how it got sick, how it got better. And so I went back to school. I did an internal medicine program in Kansas City and totally changed my practice in working with those who were disabled with rheumatologic conditions, and really thoroughly enjoyed that practice. And then one of my mentors in healing that I found along my journey was Dr. Victor Frank, and he developed a system of healing known as Total Body Modification. And as he was getting ready to retire from that, he ended up passing the baton to me, and so I purchased a company. It was back in 2009, 2008, 9, and I've been running Total Body Modification ever since that time, training healthcare practitioners literally around the globe. And we're here today because Nicole is just beginning her own medical practice, and I was speaking with her about how important it is that people beginning to work with her really understand our form of medicine, because it's very distinct from the type of medicine that everyone else, that all of you more than likely grew up with. I cottoned on to this type of medicine at age 12, and so I was a little bit unique in that very early in life, I realized masking symptoms was a dead end and was not what I wanted to do. and went on the journey of really discovering if you're not going to mask symptoms, what do you do? And that's what's led us here today, and me here to be sitting down with you.
Yeah, my life is a direct result from the type of medicine that he's been able to provide. And a question that we had always had as kids was, what is TBM? So that would be my first question. What is total body modification?
Great. I'll take it from there. Total body modification, or TBM, it began in the 1960s when, again, my mentor, Viktor Frankl, his wife also developed leukemia, a very different type of leukemia than you had. Hers was CLL, not ALL, and it's what adults typically get. And he was already a practicing chiropractor, naturopath, and radionics practitioner. And so he had a considerable background, but when his wife had leukemia, and they had several kids, some adopted, some that were foster children, and his comment was, I realized if I lost her, I had to raise these kids alone. And he said that was not happening. And so he went to figure out how to get her well, and had a lot of innovative breakthroughs in doing that. And then shortly after, and she got well and fully recovered. And in the process during that time, he ended up working with a disabled marathon runner, a high school champion marathon runner, or maybe he was in college, was losing his scholarship because he couldn't compete anymore. His dad was a patient of Dr. Frankl's, got his son running again, and the dad said, whoa, I've taken to every specialist there is. Why did you get results when others didn't? Well, that led to Viktor actually working with Jet Propulsion Laboratories in Nassau, in Pasadena, California, where he had access, again, this is in the late 60s, early 70s, had access to medical monitoring equipment that allowed him to put together an entire new way to evaluate a body, to examine a body, and an entirely new way to get instant results based on that evaluation. What is that evaluation? Essentially, we see the body like a touch screen, and it's behind you. You can't see it, but behind you, Nicole, is a body point chart. Folks at home can see that. And just like on your touchscreen phone, you can touch different apps and they will open up and you can work within them. We use the body like a touch screen. We can touch different apps, different points, which will open up and allow us to evaluate different functions. And then if we find there's a functional problem, then we go to the spinal column, where the network of nerves that's involved in regulation emits. They're all like junction boxes up and down the spine. They're called sympathetic and parasympathetic ganglia. And we can physically stimulate any of those places along the spine and impact the function that we were working with. So if I were to touch the liver, and we use an intact muscle. So if I were to touch here, I can say, give me a yes, give me a no. And then I can touch the liver evaluation point, and if it is strong, then I can move on to, let's just say, the left kidney, and we're just going to pretend it's weak. And if that were weak, I could now just stimulate along your spine. There are 3 certain points that we use for the kidney, and I would come back and I would reevaluate it, and it's strong, and I would move on to evaluate someplace else. That is the foundational innovative discovery that Dr. Frank made. And of course that led to a bunch of others and so forth. But what came out of it were answers. And when I was confronted with your illness, I didn't have answers. And TBM, I see TBM as an answer machine. If a practitioner doesn't know what's going on, we can apply TBM, quickly learn what's going on. And even better than that, we can quickly get the body to reveal to us what needs to be done to get the body working again. And so it's a very efficient way to get answers and to know what to do to improve things. So in a nutshell, that's really the core of TBM. Of course, we do a lot of lifestyle related things with that. There's some life coaching that comes with that. There's a lot of things we integrate, but those are supportive things. The core is really to quickly discover where regulation has broken down and is creating illness, suffering, and then to quickly reestablish regulation, which results in wellness and feeling better. So that's the core of that. And in the late 70s, he was coerced, if you will, into teaching. And so we've been teaching, we're in just a few years here, 50 years of teaching this system of healing throughout the world.
Wow. How long does it take, if you're working with a TBM practitioner, how long does it take to restore function in the body or start to restore function?
You saw the example I gave with the kidney. Mm-hmm. It would restore function to that kidney immediately. So the restoration of function is immediate. When you restore function, sometimes there's an immediate change in signs or symptoms. So let's say with that kidney, let's say there were indications of kidney infection in the urinalysis. The next urinalysis may show a completely clear finding, no indication of kidney infection. Or it might not, and it might be a few days. So sometimes there's some tissue damage that's going to take a bit of time for those cells to turn over and for repair to happen. And sometimes that's really not the case. There isn't much damage. Everything's essentially fine. It's just not functioning. So there's nothing broken, just the function, the regulation is not happening. So we can always restore regulation instantly, if you will. But sometimes once that regulation gets restored, there has to be some turnover, some fresh tissue, some repair, healing that way, that may take a little bit of time. So some symptoms, and we kind of get addicted to this in TBM, usually the symptoms go away instantly. And so much so that if they don't, we generally think we've missed something or we did something wrong. But sometimes it takes a little bit. Usually not very long.
So when you're saying that you're dealing with symptoms and you're looking for function in the body that is not optimal or it's dysregulated, are you diagnosing something with that, or what is the difference between you touching the kidney point and saying something's like someone saying something's wrong with it, or diagnosing a kidney issue versus a dysregulated function?
That's a great question. So I'm going to do my best to be brief with that. I'm going to tend to want to go through some history, and I'll just touch on it a little bit. In the West, there are two lineages of healing. One uses very drastic measures. George Washington, John Adams, their teeth fell out because to treat malaria, they poisoned them with mercury. And mercury causes it destroys ligaments, and so their teeth fell out and they both had wooden teeth, for instance. That's very drastic.
Yeah.
right? So these drastic lineage has really not been very popular throughout the centuries. And then there was the folk medicine or the subtle medicine group. They tended to people who were more altruistic. They just were known to be good at medicine in their communities, in their family, and whatnot. One of these, I had an ancestor here in Nevada, just a few hours drive here north of Las Vegas in what's called Spring Valley. She was alone quite often with their 13 children while my great-great-grandfather was out driving cattle. And she would leave her 13 children and travel all over the area, and it would take weeks to travel back then. So her children would be alone a lot. And because she got called out as like the doctor, she had no professional training, all folk medicine, and they didn't call the doctors, they called her. If you called a professional, you needed to be ready for, crazy things to happen because they used very drastic measures. I had another ancestor, these are your ancestors as well. She called a professional doctor. She was nursing 2 children and she was sick, and he said, what you need is to drink turpentine. And that was a very common medicine. She drank the turpentine and nursed her babies. And just a few days later, there was a funeral, one giant coffin with our grandma and it was 2 aunts. If I remember right, it was 2 girls that she'd been nursing. So that's what happened. And so there was always this competition between these 2 lineages. And the professional class didn't like to be outperformed by, a lot of times it was women, wasn't always women. A lot of times it was religious figures. Priests were very common. I could name a lot of priests that have been famous throughout history and medicine. And so in the early 20th century, the professional class finally instituted a program through laws and regulation and control of education that essentially completely eliminated, in the United States, completely eliminated the subtle influence medicine class. And this derby between those two goes back at least to the 14th century in England. In the 18th century, someone who was training to be a professional physician, his name was Mesmer, he did not want to do drastic medicine. At that time, today drastic medicine is called biomedicine or biological medicine. A lot of times people call it Western medicine or modern medicine, terms like that. I don't use those terms because what we do is Western medicine, what we do is modern medicine. But we're different from them. And so biological medicine is really what they prefer to go by when you get to labeling it, as you will. Our lineage began in the 18th century with Franz Mesmer, who graduated with his professional degree in Vienna, but said, I don't want to do drastic medicine. It seems to make people more sick than well. And he actually had a physician who was a mentor of his, Richard Mead from England, mostly, I think exclusively through his writings. I don't know that they ever met, and I haven't looked to see if they would line up timeline-wise either way. But he had a priest who was his mentor named Maximilian Heil, and he was known as Father Light in Germany. Heil in German means light. So Father Light was the one who trained Mesmer in how to do a healing method that was distinct from the heroic medicine. So the point is, and from Mesmer onward, we had a professional class. So prior to Mesmer, it was always lay individuals doing folk medicine, and then you had professionals doing heroic medicine. What happened though with Mesmer is he took the folk medicine practices and he made it a professional class. And so there has been really kind of a derby between these two professional classes ever since. In our lineage, in subtle medicine, we do not diagnose, we do not treat disease, we don't prescribe dangerous medicines. And so, in answer to your question, if I were to touch your kidney and have a positive indicator that something's wrong, I wouldn't be diagnosing you with any kidney disease. I would just say your kidney's in dysregulation. That's not a good thing. We're going to fix it. We could check your heart. We could check your ovaries, your uterus. We could check your pituitary. We could check hearing. We can check vision. Any function that there is in the body. In fact, recently we've incorporated a lot of the Human Genome Project revelations into TBM, where we can actually test for functions relating to genetic issues, what are called single nucleotide polymorphisms. So we can get super specific. If we're aware of a function, we can evaluate it and we can make sure that it's on board. And so we, unlike this other lineage, we do not directly treat anything in the body. We see the body as the only one who's capable to restore itself. We work indirectly. So if you had a kidney infection, I would not work on your kidney infection. I would work on restoring all of the functions that are needed for your body to resolve the kidney infection. So I work indirectly. So I don't diagnose disease. We don't diagnose disease in TBM. We determine dysfunctions, things that are broken down, and we restore those functions, and that's where we limit. So we're really a completely different lineage, a completely different vocabulary, completely different way of seeing it, and thankfully a completely different result.
Yeah, that's great. You talked about supporting the body and getting those functions to regulate. Again, what within TBM, aside from muscle testing and getting some positive indicators, are there any other techniques within it, or are we doing dietary changes, or what support are we using in our daily life to when we're working with a TBM practitioner?
Sure. So first off, TBM is a system of healing that contains literally thousands of techniques, at least 3,000 techniques. So it includes any and every technique that can be brought to bear to restore and to maintain and optimize regulation. So if that is a nutrient, if that is rubbing on the spine, if that is a purple feather, I don't care.
Yeah.
So what my clients care about is just getting well and results, and doing it safely and efficiently in a way that respects their time, way that respects their pocketbook. Generally, people that do TBM, we operate outside of the national healthcare models, outside of the third-party payer system in the United States, and the relationship is just directly between us and our clients. So when it comes to things other than like that core that I mentioned, say touching a body point and then stimulating different levels on the spine, beyond that, we will do things like dietary changes, for instance. One, if you want to be well, you have to stop eating poisons. So the body has taught us over time what's poisonous and what's not. One of the things that's poisonous are non-nutritive sweeteners. Okay? Sugar is not a poison, except dose makes the poison. So if you overdo sugar, which most commercial products that use sugar today, they overdo it. Okay? But if you make something at home, you use a little bit of sugar, your body's going to be fine with that. But there are some things that such an infinitesimal amount achieves that level of being a poison that we've learned in TBM it just needs to be completely taken out. Non-nutritive sweeteners would be one of them. Today it's very vogue to talk about seed oils. We've been talking about seed oils since the 1970s. So seed oils are very, very disruptive to liver function. One specific thing. So through our evaluation methods, that became obvious very early on. We didn't need to wait decades for more data and for popular opinion to change and etc. So we cut out poisons. Secondly, we make sure that the diet is fully nutritive, so that foods are being prepared properly. It's very essential. It's not just what we eat, but how we prepare our food. In fact, I would say more important than what we eat is how we prepare our food. Let's just take a case in point. You take wheat, you grind it, mix it with some water, some quick rise yeast, and you bake this gorgeous loaf of bread. That loaf of bread will kill you. It literally is deadly. I won't go into it, but if anyone spends very long looking into that, it will kill you, whether it's obesity, whether it is celiac disease, etc. It is deadly. However, all of Western civilization was built on wheat bread. So how does something that would kill you? Well, because of the way they prepared it. So they use long fermentation methods, not quick rise yeast. Long fermentation methods, which completely transformed the macronutrient profile. Virtually none of the original carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in wheat are found in, let's say, sourdough bread. So that's just a case where how something's prepared is actually more important than what the original ingredients were that went into the food product. In addition to that, though, we need a broad diet. We completely disavow any isms: vegetarianism, veganism, paleoism, gluten-freeism, whatever. There's so many different diets. We let the body inform the person and the practitioner working with them, inform us what is needed to nourish the body. So we make sure that is there. And we really use the full spectrum. So we are very omnivore in TBM. Some things, for instance, like beef, generally 9 ounces a week is enough. That's not all that much. Some people are like, well, I like to be vegetarian. I'm like, well, you can essentially be vegetarian except 9 ounces a week of beef. And what's funny is a lot of them will like, well, beef is, whatever. And then they take their carnitine supplements. And I'm like, well, what the hell do you think carnitine is? That's beef. It's just powdered beef, highly processed, at any rate. So we make sure that there's a full diet, and we don't do elimination diets. If you're eating a certain food and having a reaction to it, we want to fix that reaction rather than say, well, just don't eat that food for the rest of your life, or move to another part of the continent that doesn't have that shrub in it. We don't do that. Every symptom is asking for a correction. If something's wrong, the body will let you know with the symptom. Now, historically, going back, hundreds, thousands, millions of years ago, when symptoms appeared, something was wrong. And when the symptom disappeared, it was now right. And you could trust that because we hadn't developed a cystification to cheat the system. So eventually we learned, like, wow, if we take white willow bark and we do an extract from it and concentrate it, we can get this salicylate extract from it that eventually we called aspirin. And so you could take that extract and the symptom would be gone. Well, what was the natural thing to do? Well, okay, things must be right again. But no, they're not right. You're just no longer aware that things aren't right. And so what's going to happen over time when something's wrong and it doesn't get addressed, it's going to grow and create new problems. And so as we got more sophisticated, we got more and more sophisticated with symptom suppression, with clipping the wires to the fire alarm, if you will. And the drastic medical system, the biomedical system, is all about making you comfortable with a body that is increasingly sick. What we do is we work to restore regulation, which makes the body increasingly well. And as that is happening, you feel better and better and better. And your life opens up. Things that you couldn't eat before, you can now eat. The hike up the mountain that you couldn't do before, you now can. The night that you couldn't sleep all the way through, you now are. The menstrual cycle you couldn't have without missing 2 days of work, you now hardly even noticing that the menstrual cycle is even happening. So in biomedicine, they have this, I used to associate with the Pain Research Center at University of Utah. And I learned, I was surrounded by just very brilliant PhDs and very brilliant MDs. But I learned that there was this assumption that they were operating on. And these assumptions, I feel, are one of the main reasons that the medical systems in virtually every country on earth aren't producing health. Because they all seem to have this assumption. One, you're never going to be healthier than you are today. So your body will never work better than it does right now. So therefore, all we can do is replace the lost function or make you comfortable with the lost function. So if your thyroid isn't producing enough thyroxine, the basal thyroid hormone, then we'll just give that to you. Because your thyroid will never be any better than it is right now. What we would say in our form of medicine is, well, let's see if we can get the thyroid to make that hormone again on its own, rather than just assume it will never get better. And using that example, from my experience, it's nearly always able to start producing it, unless it's been surgically removed or irradiated or something like that. So the first assumption, the body will never be better. The second assumption is that the patient or client will not do anything on their own to be better. So if you need to make some dietary changes, you need to not stay up playing video games till 3 a.m., if you need to start exercising, if you need to smoke less or whatever, you can't count on that. That's not going to happen. So you don't even include them in the process of getting well. It's not a team approach. But in TBM, it's a team approach. We cannot restore regulation unless we work together. It completely collapses if it's all just on me. Because I don't use drastic measures. I use subtle measures that require a team effort. So the second assumption is that the client will do nothing to help themselves. The third assumption is the client will not spend any of their money unless the government healthcare system or in the United States, the third-party payer will cover it. So if there is a therapy that's needed, but that's considered experimental or investigational, and it's not covered, that the patient will not pay for it themselves. What we have found is people are eager to do whatever it takes to get well. And if your fees are reasonable and you're honest, you're doing right by your clients, they'll be gladly to pay for things that produce results. So we actually come from the assumption that, one, the body will get better, and that's what we're working to do. Two, the client will team up with us and will work with us. And three, we will use things that aren't necessarily mainstream and established by accepted evidence or what have you, provided there's good reason for it and it's producing results. So we're kind of like an uncle. We're a completely different approach to health and wellness, and people who come to us need to be prepared for that and to appreciate that and be ready for that distinction. The Nazarene used the parable that you don't put new wine in old bottles. Back then, the wine bottles were leather, and I think they used stomachs from goats and so forth. And you put new wine in and you seal it off, and when it ferments, it expands, and that stomach, if that's what they used, will stretch. And then as the wine matures and all the yeast cells die and collapse, that pressure goes away, but now the stomach is all hard and brittle. But you can open the top and you can pour the wine out. Well, if you put new wine into that and seal it and it starts to ferment, it just busts the old tissue, the old leather, the old bottle, because it can't stretch. It's lost its elasticity. And it's that way for our care. A person needs to come to us knowing we're not going to directly seek to eliminate a symptom. We're going to use symptoms, amongst other things, to alert us to loss of function. We're going to work to restore that function, and we're going to use the symptom as feedback that we're on the right track and that things are doing better. So we have an entirely different relationship with symptoms. Symptoms aren't something to be eliminated, and that when they're eliminated, that we're going to call that well. Symptoms are used as an indication something's wrong, and the diminution of that symptom indicates to us that things are getting right. And when that symptom is completely resolved, we've got things completely right. So we use symptoms. And again, I just want to reiterate, if you equate absence of symptoms with health, and what you do to get rid of the symptom doesn't restore the function, you now have a dysfunction that's happening in your body that is growing and affecting you, but you're now numb to it. And over time, what's that going to develop into? Cancer, heart disease, diabetes, chronic insomnia, rapid weight gain. Like where's that going to go? And so that's why we don't play that game at all. So we tough it out. Okay? We tough it out. We don't mask the symptoms. We do the hard work sometimes that will bring about a restoration of function. But because we've been at this in TBM specifically for over 50 years, we're pretty fast at it. You generally don't have to tough it out very long. And the results speak for themselves and spur motivation. When we see progress, it's pretty easy to stay the course. It's when things aren't changing that it gets discouraging.
You talk about using symptoms as a tool to know that we're on the right path of regulating function. For someone who has used drastic medicine throughout their life and they're watching this video and they have a list of symptoms that they're either masking or dealing with and trying to tough it out, is their body in a position where they can trust those symptoms and that feedback, or is there a process of learning when it comes to getting your body back into regulation, being able to trust the feedback that's coming as well?
If you're doing things to stifle symptoms, no, you can't trust it. And if you're doing things to stifle symptoms, first off, the body has the capacity to stop any symptom instantly. Every symptom is there because the body chose to put it there. And it chose to put it there to let you know something needs to be done. And if you just eliminate it, the symptom, without doing what the body wanted you to do, now you can't trust symptoms. You just totally, thrown the whole system really into chaos. And so the feedback isn't accurate. So in order for anything really, let's just use a drug as an example, to make a symptom go away, it has to take over the mechanisms that produce the symptom. And so for a drug to, for instance, let's say the symptom is you measure your blood pressure and it's, 200 over, 135. So, okay, it's high blood pressure. That's the symptom. You take a drug and now it's, like 130 over 90 or something like that. And you're like, okay, I just fixed my high blood pressure. Well, you've changed the blood pressure. I don't know if I would use the word fixed. You've changed it, but the reason the blood pressure wasn't right has not been addressed at all. And so that's not being addressed. What's that going to lead to? Secondarily, you've just overpowered the body's control of its own blood pressure and imposed a certain blood pressure parameter upon the body against its will. What damage did you in the process of doing that, and are you doing ongoing day after day after day? And what's that going to lead to? So you not only didn't fix that original dysfunction, you just added a whole bunch more dysfunctions on top of that. And what's down the road on that path? So with my requirement, not all TBMers are this stringent. I encourage them all to be, is to only work with people who are very committed to stop masking symptoms for the rest of their life. Trying to restore regulation in a body where drugs are being taken that disrupt and damage regulation. It's like trying to patch holes in the roof while someone's running around up there with a big javelin poking new ones at the same time. It makes no sense. If you want to use drastic medicine as your model, you like the results of that, if that's what you want to do, great. If you're ready just to give that up, we say that the only time drastic medicine is justified is if death or permanent disability would result if it were not used. So for instance, with you, with your leukemia diagnosis, you had a very short period of time to live unless very drastic measures were taken. That was recognized. And so we took those drastic measures. Those drastic measures didn't heal you. Those drastic measures bought us time to heal you. And so once we got out of the hospital, we went to someone who knew what to do to heal you. And that was Dr. Fuller Royal here in Las Vegas, right? And so I'm not saying there's never a place for it. Sometimes we're in those situations. But by and large, the only winning move, if you know the end of the movie War Games, the only winning move is not to play. Back in the 90s, the vice president of marketing for the American Pharmaceutical Association at their convention stated for every dollar that is spent on biomedicines, pharmaceuticals, $1.83 is spent on cleaning up the effects of that dollar that was spent. That's a great business model. If your customers, for every dollar they spend with you, are forced to spend another $1.83 to counteract the effects of that dollar, you've just earned, $2.83 right out of the gate, right? But that $1.83, it starts the process all over again, right? And and it's like Kelly and Casey Means are have been all over the news lately, and they're advising RFK Jr. with Make America Healthy Again. And this is a statement that they often say, and that is, there's nothing more profitable than a sick child, because you have the rest of their life to just make all sorts of money off of that. And so for me, if that's the system you want to do, then so be it. If you're ready for something entirely different that has no side effects, the side effect is that you have to do your part. The side effect is sometimes you have to be a little patient while the body rights itself. Okay? Side effect is you have to work together with someone. It's not something you can do on your own. You cannot do this healing to yourself or on yourself. Okay? We regulate one another. If you study the field of attachment research, James Cohen's work, the emotionally focused therapy, Sue Johnson, and of course John Bowlby's work. If you understand that, we human beings regulate one another. And so we take that to a professional level. And so it is a social thing. So if you can deal with those parameters, chances are a person will be very, very happy with the results they get. And having a body every day that works better. I am the healthiest I've ever been in my whole life. I was disabled by the age of 12. And every year to couple of years, I've made enough strides where I can say I'm the healthiest that I've ever been. And that's what restoring regulation. Mesmer, he proclaimed one cause and one cure. He said all disease is caused by one thing, and it's all cured by one thing. And what he said is that one thing is dysregulation. If the body is not regulating itself properly, that is the cause of illness and suffering and disability and pain. And if you restore regulation, that is the one cure. And so our system is about finding that dysregulation, restoring it back, so that which was lost can be found again.
For someone that is interested in becoming a client, we've talked a lot about drastic medicine and pharmaceutical measures and sick children, and if you're in that system, you end up like a domino effect. And at what point can you decide that you're done with that and come out of that? Like what would qualify you to become a client? Is it just a decision, or what would qualify a person to make this type of change and want to choose into a different umbrella of medicine?
The ability to draw breath. That's the only qualification. The burden on the practitioner is to make sure that there's safety. So if someone is in the hospital intubated, right?
Yep.
You don't just disconnect everything and whatnot. So, it's an extreme example, but there has to be safety. So the first thing is safety. The Latin phrase that's a lot of times attributed to Hippocrates, primum non nocere, which is first do no harm. And that's supposedly part of the Hippocratic Oath. It's actually technically not, but people think of it as the Hippocratic Oath, and they sure as shit do not practice it. You will never find in the drastic medical lineage where first do no harm was something that was practiced. I know some might be a little upset at me saying that, but I'm just telling you, you look at the results and that's never been the criteria. In our lineage, it's always been the criteria. So it has to be safe to do whatever we do. Now, for instance, when you were in the hospital and I started calling other physicians around the country, and they all said, I will not touch a child with cancer. I will, if she were over the age of 18, I would work with her, but I will not touch her. And so I had no options, right? I'm calling. And I get Dr. Fuller on the line, and he said, look, this is what the hospital's going to do. They need to do that. They get her to this point. Once she's to that point where they will release her from the hospital, bring her to me. And we'll start working on the healing process. He recognized certain things had to be done for there to be safety, to have time to do the healing. So a person's qualified if they can breathe, and if receiving what we do is safe. And some might be taking a medication. So for instance, let's say they have insulin-dependent diabetes. So they're administering insulin. They would need to work with a TBM practitioner who's had very specific training on how to apply TBM to someone who is insulin dependent. The rules are different. And as long as the rules are followed, which means there's safety put in place, nothing is done that is going to jeopardize their well-being, then we can work with that person. And in my experience, they will not, after a certain period of time, need to continue to use that insulin. That's what I've seen in working with those individuals. So if they can breathe, and if the training and the other things are available for it to be safe, it's green light. It doesn't matter what religion. The other thing is the person needs to be willing to do whatever their body requires. And if that requirement is 9 ounces of red meat a week, which is what we found is universal, then that's what needs to be done. And if a person says, well, I'm a Jainist, practicing Jainist from India, then their religious belief would stop them from doing what would be needed for them to heal. And I would say that person, TBM is not for that person. They would need to find some system of healing that worked within the Jainist, philosophy. That's kind of, again, is an extreme situation I'm using as an example. But a person needs to be completely willing to do whatever it takes. And the body will let us know. We read the body gives us feedback. And if there's something that needs to be done, it's because the body said it needs to be done. If it's something that needs to be eliminated, for a short period of time from the diet, or if a sleeping schedule needs to be adjusted, or what have you, it's always the body letting us know what its needs are. It's not, well, in my opinion, you should do this, and so I'm going to tell you what to do in my opinion. We actually don't. We don't see ourselves as the expert. Your body is the expert. We are body whisperers. We have a system of evaluation that lets us hear the messages from the body, directing us on how to respond. We do our best to respond. And then the body gives us more feedback, and we respond again, and more feedback. And that is it's a communication. In fact, you asked earlier, what is TBM? I could also just say it's a form of communication. Just like a cell phone is a form of communication that wasn't possible 100 years ago. TBM is a form of communication between two bodies, mine and yours, if I'm working with you, that allows us to achieve things that couldn't be achieved prior to its development.
As a TBM practitioner or as a client, how, falling into biomedicine and drastic medicine, how do we prevent that domino effect? So you said TBM has around 3,000 techniques. Are TBM practitioners taught how to just use this one last form of medicine until it dries? Or are they capable of, within their training, are they taught to wield different areas of medicine or different areas of the lineage? And how do we know that they aren't just, they have this one thing that takes care of this one symptom and you're just gonna take it until the end?
So, because we've been at this for over half a century, formally as Total Body Modification, and really prior to that for several centuries, we've learned a lot of things, and we've developed answers, and we've gotten better at getting solutions implemented quicker. That being said, it's open-ended. So if we, for instance, with the inoculations that came with, what's called, the COVID pandemic, right? And the inoculations that were developed for that, they put new ingredients in there. And some of those ingredients had never, ever been developed and used inside of the body. So it created problems that we'd never, ever seen before. And so because of that, we had to develop some new techniques. So our system is open-ended. If we ever run into a situation where something is truly novel, we really don't have anything in our library that quite resolves that. If a practitioner is thoroughly trained, on their own, they will be able to develop something. If they're not that thoroughly trained, they can reach out to other practitioners who can work together with them to come up with solutions. Is that what you mean by stopping the domino effect and not trying to overwork one technique to solve everything? Yes,
if there was an opportunity for further learning within it and further development on the technique. You've talked about a lot of the techniques are centuries old, and how they develop over time. Especially we have a toxic environment now, and how does our body deal with that? And there's a lot of new things like with inoculations that were required for a lot of people and causing new problems. So after a period of time in your life where you are using drastic medicine and on medication, or you've had a lot of drastic intervention, is that something that your body can ever recover from? Do you ever get amnesty from that? Do these medications just come in your system and out your system, and then you deal with the damage done later?
Our experience is that every pharmaceutical has a lifelong effect. In fact, I want to differentiate between repair and healing. If I were to get a laceration on the back of my hand, within X number of days, that laceration will have repaired. Sickness, a laceration is not sickness. That's trauma. That's the effects of trauma. That's tissue damage. It has nothing to do with function. It's damage to the hardware. Sickness is damage to the software. The body is not capable of fixing its own software. So once the software has been damaged, that dysfunctional programming will last for the rest of that person's life. And all that they will be able to do is try to compensate, restrict their life, minimize their life, treat symptoms to deal with the effects of that damage, of that loss of function. Unless there's an intervention to restore that function. So just like exposure to a toxin or a microbe or physical trauma or psychological trauma, with intervention, that can be turned around. Those things can be turned around, so can pharmaceuticals. So a big part of what we do is to wipe away the effects of all the pharmaceuticals that have ever been taken, all the physical traumas that have ever been subjected to, all of the psychological traumas, etc. So TBM is amnesty for a person. So from this point forward, once we've went through this renewal process, those things are behind them. And now the things they do to make their life better will work. And the things that are available to everyone are now available to them.
So how does shifting away from drastic medicine into subtle influence healing and subtle influence medicine, how does that affect you as an individual? How does it affect the people around you? Is it something that if you heal as an individual and you're working with a practitioner, are those effects going to ripple out in your life? Or is it just something that every individual person kind of has to do on their own?
I just want to go back to something I said earlier, and that is we regulate one another. That's what we do as human beings. James Cohen tried to get a normal functional MRI indicating normal brain function on an individual, and he couldn't until he got another individual in the room with him. That the only way to achieve normal physiology is through connection. We have to have connection. There was a documentary done in the 1970s about African healing, some tribal traditional healing. The documentary is called Rich Man's Medicine, Poor Man's Medicine. And in there, when someone became ill, they went to the medicine man with their family and their neighbors. They didn't see that sick person as the problem. They saw the community as the problem, and that the sickness in that person was making the community aware that the community wasn't right. And so they went as a group to the medicine man, and the medicine man directed what to do directly for this person and what to do as a community to support them in getting well and for it to not come back. That is healing. Again, so many people say, well, can you do TBM on yourself? I'm like, no, you can't. That's a complete denial of human nature. You cannot get normal physiology in isolation. What is the greatest form of psychological torture?
Isolation.
Solitary confinement. Yeah, solitary confinement. And it that ages people severely. And psychologically, a lot of times they don't ever come back from that. Our psychology is no different than the physiology of our heart or our liver or our joints. Okay? We regulate one another. One of the problems with biomedicine, it gets us to turn into some little physical pill bottle to like get answers for us not regulating when we actually need to reach out to one another. And this is where, TBM's lineage is folk medicine. And I include my clients, I teach them basic TBM. There are basic TBM things that people can do within their own family, within their own friends, so they can turn to each other for day-to-day things. And when things rise above that, then they come to the practitioner. So if there's anything we need more in our society today, it's meaningful connection. And to me, that's the biggest problem with biomedicine. It's severing these connections. Whether it's Botox that turns off the emotional brain centers that drive the expression of motion on the face. Therefore, communication can happen. Most of our communication, you're sitting there right now, not saying a whole lot while I'm talking, okay? But everything I say to you, you're mirroring back to me on your face. And that's informing me, and we're engaging this way. If you're using Botox, that gets shut off. And that connection and that dance can't happen. Same thing happens if you take Advil, Tylenol, aspirin, those types of things as well. So TBM also is an invitation to heal through connection, to heal through regulating one another, and to become less dependent on a professional class. And to use a professional class when it's called for, but to develop independence of health. If health isn't something we can really maintain independently most of the time, we're not very free, are we? No matter how free we are, how free are we if we can't get through a day without a pill that requires 3 countries and, a dozen people taking their cut along the way for us to have it to be able to take it? How free really are we? So I'm veering off track a little bit, but I'm wanting to speak to really the depth and breadth of what is possible, and what those of us who fully embrace this perspective are able to benefit from, experience.
This is one of the things that piqued my interest in becoming a practitioner. I am a mother of 2 children, and there was a lot of things that would kind of go wrong that were difficult when I first had children, and nursing and runny noses and fevers and infections. And I had to call on my dad and some other TBM practitioners quite often to help get them back into regulation. And learning that as just a mom, I could learn these tools and implement them in my daily life and not have to reach out constantly for somebody. It is a really inexpensive form of care that is cost effective and gives great effective results. And so is there limitations on, we talked about as long as they're breathing, so you can do TBM on kids, on infants, and is it an expensive form of healing in biomedicine? From experience, you spend thousands and tens of thousands of dollars, and I'm sure that was the same experience because you flipped the bill for my cancer treatment. Is this form of healing and medicine, is it something that will also break the bank? Is it something that is going to be around for the next 100 years? If I work to implement it in my life, can I depend on it being there? Is there any opportunity for me to learn any other tools so I can, or education as a client or as a parent or as a practitioner, where I can implement these into my daily life to help set me up for success and have a healthier lifestyle later?
Our type of medicine requires personal effort. So, one, to personally receive the benefits. Two, for it to continue to be in existence in society. So the professional class of drastic practitioners, biomedical physicians, and the whole pharmaceutical industrial complex wants us to not exist whatsoever. And they exert tremendous effort to do that. You look at the censoring that was done during the whole COVID era. Okay, if you said anything against, what the pharmaceutical industrial complex wanted to be said, you were deplatformed, you were debanked, you lost your hospital privileges, etc. Okay, that's very well known. Well, that's not new. Mesmer was driven out of Vienna. Semmelweis was put into an insane asylum and executed. Okay, there's been a battle. And if the public fights for this other system of healing to be available, it will be available. And thankfully it is today. And it is to some degree in every country. Things, vary from place to place. I practice a fair bit in Thailand. There's very little competition between their things. They can move back and forth very freely and so forth. It's not like we find here or in Europe and so forth. So yeah, it's always going to be around. It's been around since the dawn of time, folk medicine, and the professional class will be here as long as education can happen. I would need free speech to be able to do that. It's one of the reasons that, free speech is so paramount. You can't have health if you can't share information that you need to be able to get to, be healthy. So.
I wanted to ask, is total body modification a placebo?
Let's define placebo. So placebo means to please. And by that definition, TBM pleases people. It's interesting in biomedical studies, what is hard to do better than is the placebo. Is something that only works through what is inherent already within the body of the client. So someone interacts with the client with healing objectives. That client engages with them. There's an exchange between two people that has no known therapeutic value. That is really tough to beat. Think about that. Placebo is the gold standard. It's what everything has to be. You do nothing other than two people interacting. It tells you how powerful that is. You do nothing, and if you can beat that, you've got something really special, from a biomedical viewpoint. That's a really effective drug if you can do better than placebo. Now, here's another definition of placebo, and that is something that only has temporary result. So one of the things they'll say, well, when they do those studies, the placebo result only lasts for a few days. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it lasts for the rest of the person's life. And sometimes it only does last for a few days. But how long does a drug last? Only as long as you're taking it. Once you stop, the problem's back. To me, that meets the definition of a placebo. What we do lasts for the rest of a person's life. So we take that dynamic. Something is happening when two people get together that is hard to beat. Viktor Frankl said TBM is the tips and tricks of the old healing masters dressed up in modern day computer language, allowing us to do by intent what they were only able to do by accident. So what happens in a placebo exchange, in those medical studies? It's mysterious. It's done by accident, right? Sometimes nothing seems to happen. Sometimes there's a temporary result. Sometimes there's a lasting result. Well, our lineage, Mesmer and forward, we apply the scientific method to that. And we do that by intent. Two of us get together and it's very focused. It's very reproducible. It's very efficient. So we essentially do the same thing that a placebo does, except ours has a lasting benefit for the rest of a person's life. When I was in medical school, I worked in Viktor Frankl's office. While I was there, I received TBM for poison ivy. In my early teens, I got exposed to poison ivy and my head looked like a pumpkin. I don't know if you've seen these photos, but no. we took pictures back then. It's not even funny. It looks so bad. I was so miserable. And my parents took me to a drastic medical practitioner, and I think he gave me steroids and Benadryl, I don't know, whatever. And told my mom if I got exposed to poison ivy again, I would probably die. I would have such a severe reaction. That was the most severe reaction he'd seen, and if I got exposed again, I might not survive. And so I guess about 9 years later, I'm in Viktor Frank's office, and they're like, is there anything you want us to fix for you? And I'm like, well, yeah, poison ivy, blah, blah, blah. I have to avoid it, and I like to hike and be outdoors, so I'm always kind of scared about it. And they said, oh, yeah, we have a way of addressing that. And he got this little vial that said poison ivy on it, and it's a radionics vial. It's actually just water with electromagnetic frequencies embedded into the water. And so they used that to do the evaluation and do the correction. It took like 3 minutes. And I got exposed like 40, 50 times. I used to do a lot of whitewater rafting and kayaking, and I would walk through and drag my boat and walk through poison ivy all the time. Never had a reaction. Then I had a severely traumatic psychological experience where in front of an audience, I lost my voice. And if I went to speak, I could hardly stand. The pain was so severe. And my entire livelihood was based on my ability to speak. I had to not talk for a solid 2 weeks to calm down the inflammation. And that shock triggered a whole bunch of dysregulation. It was very traumatic for me. I got exposed to poison ivy and I had a reaction to poison ivy. So it'll last a lifetime unless something comes along and throws us into dysregulation again. So part of what we teach in TBM is how to have these things last a lifetime. If you drink a whole, bottle of Jack Daniels in one night, yeah, some dysregulation is going to kick in as a result of that. That's going to way exceed resilience. Anytime we exceed the resilience or the stress limit of any particular function, that function breaks. That's what drugs do. They break a function to take control of it. But it's what trauma does: physical trauma, psychological trauma, chemical trauma, microbial trauma, etc. And so when resilience is exceeded, the programming fails. Why does it do that? It's actually a defense mechanism. If you plug in if you're running your hair dryer and your curling iron in the bathroom, it can trip that little GFI, the breaker, right? Nothing short of resetting that breaker will bring it back. Once dysregulation happens in the body, nothing will bring it back until it gets reset. And that requires an intervention. It requires another person. It can't be done through diet. It requires another person. We are the remedy. Human beings are the remedy for other human beings. That ultimately is the message of TBM. We just take it to a level of medical science to help people in really severe need. But on a day-to-day basis, that's it's a dynamic we can all draw upon all the time. So no, it's not a placebo because it lasts forever. But yes, whatever dynamic is happening in a placebo, we're actually using a similar dynamic. Why is that important? Because we actually can access that dynamic over the phone. TBM be done distance. Mesmer learned that from the very early on. Back then, TBM was called magnetic healing. And they learned very early on that you could be very distant from someone. They would do experiments just in the other room, but they would also do them in other towns. And so we have found if we have a voice connection, we can get very consistent, reliable results. Because whatever is happening, now I have my models. I think it has to do with memory consolidation and memory activation and reconsolidation of memory patterns. Okay, so I could talk all day long about the science behind that and so forth. That's my best guess as to what's actually happening. Okay, but ultimately, I'll have to just say I don't fully know, other than the outcome is amazing. And it's safe and it's pretty easy to do. It's not all that hard to learn if someone wants to devote themselves to learning it, say as a career or just learn some fundamental things to use with their family. Yeah.
You brought up something else that I wanted to talk about. What is resilience? You talked about it's like the demand on the body and you're exceeding the demands. Over time, when you're restoring regulation in the body, does that change the level of stress that your body can handle? And does it change your level of what would generally throw you into dysregulation? Then doing total body modification, does that threshold change at all?
Yes. And in fact, that's the whole purpose. Why does the body regulate? It's to maintain homeostasis. What threatens homeostasis? Well, John McEwen introduced this term called allostasis, and that is that which threatens homeostasis. So that bottle of Jack Daniels, drinking a whole bottle of Jack Daniels, that threatens homeostasis. Not eating for a week threatens homeostasis. Falling asleep with your cell phone next to you in bed threatens homeostasis. So the body has the ability to deal with stresses, but if the stresses are greater than what the body can neutralize, it loses control of homeostasis. So resilience is the capacity to maintain homeostasis in the presence of allostasis, or in the presence of external stresses. So one of the things you have to learn is to work within your body's resilience. And when you do work within your body's resilience, our resilience grows. But when we avoid certain things that, for comfort purposes, like we cut out food, or we cut out social experiences, or what have you, then it tends to shrink. So if we honor our resilience and we're constantly pushing to expand it, TBM is here to support that. So we eventually have a very full diet. We have a very full social interaction. We have a very full career, etc. Like all the keyboards on the piano can now be played again. And I call that circles, not squares. I find as soon as someone says, well, I can't eat this, you wait a while and they can't eat something else. You wait a little longer, they can't eat another thing. I had someone come into me, the only thing she could eat were avocados. That was it. That was her only food. Everything else she ate other than avocados made her sick.
Wow.
And so we got her eating a full diet. That's one of the greatest, things, and it's actually pretty easy to do in TBM. It's one of the more just delightful things to do. It's kind of the low-hanging fruit as a practitioner, is to reopen someone's diet back up. So we can quickly move through food sensitivities and restore lost digestive functions that created the problems with those foods in the first place. And so respecting our resilience, but pushing those boundaries, it's like this circle can grow when we just exclude certain people, exclude certain diets, exclude traveling, exclude, fitness. I have bad knees, so I can't, whatever. You start doing that and it starts to shrink. It makes me think of the walls in episode 4 of Star Wars, when they get in that giant trash compactor and the walls start coming in. It's like that. And TBM is the opposite of that. I eat everything. People are shocked at all the things, that I eat. And I have fun. I enjoy. I have a great relationship with food. I have a great relationship with people. I have a great relationship with politics, with my neighbors, and like that's like a full life, really, where all the keys on the keyboard can be played. That's the promise of TBM that excites me the most. Yes, it's nice to have less pain. Yes, it's nice to sleep better. Yes, it's nice to not have constipation. But ultimately, that's not what life is about. Absence of pain, absence of constipation, sleeping through the night. Life's about engaging with other people, engaging with the world, experiencing a sense of joy and gratitude.
Yeah, it sounds like TBM really opens up the possibilities and opens all of the doors and removes all of the walls and all the barriers. I know that biomedicine, biological medicine, and drastic medicine, those might be newer terms for people. And earlier last year, we had a conversation where I had to make a list of every medication that I had taken throughout my whole life. And my dad had kept all of my papers and all the studies and everything that I had taken during my cancer treatment. And as an adult, I had left my parents' nest and kind of did my own thing and had my health get off track and taken pharmaceuticals, and even despite on how I was raised. And what is something that was really mind-blowing to me is, for someone that has had very limited pharmaceutical intervention and drastic medicine intervention and biological intervention, my list of medications was huge. And it is surprising to see how embedded biological medicine is in our daily life, and how there's going to be some fear for clients in losing this safety net in their mind for digestive, allergy and antibiotic, Botox, filler, pain medication, topical like pain medications, weight loss medications, sleep, and all of the fear that comes with choosing to do something else and choosing to only use that when your life is threatened or permanent disability is threatened, and choosing to live a fruitful life where you have unlimited potential. Is the fear something that's addressed in care? And is there an emotional component that's included when we're regulating your system throughout doing the TBM care with clients?
Well, the first thing I want to say is all of those things are not a safety net, they're a crutch. A crutch can sometimes look like it's a safety net, but it's not. And the only true safety net is a self-reliant body. You want to have a safety net? Have a body. I've not taken any pharmaceuticals since I was 19.
How old are you now?
I'm 60. And that's the safety net.
Yeah.
And I can run 10 miles, no problem. And unless it's really hot, I'm here in Vegas. If it's a cooler day like it is today, I don't need water. I can run 10 miles, no water. And I can do that on an empty stomach. That's the safety net. When you have a body with a very high level of resilience, that's the true safety net. As far as working through, yes, there are a lot of fears that come up for people with things. And yes, we have a lot of very simple, very painless approaches to move through those things very quickly. I remember when I started running, I started to run and I had this almost like panic feeling like I was going to die. So I only started running in 2014. So when I finally was able to run, because remember I was disabled at the age of 12 and running was something, even though I was doing a lot better, I could never run. Finally really got some good help in 2014. And so I could physically run. Psychologically, I felt like I was going to die. I would start running and I just felt like this panic. So I went back to the practitioner and next day I went and ran. I don't feel that anymore. We call it a situational, and I know you know a lot about situationals. We call it situational resilience. And I'm just going to tell a quick example of using that technique with someone. After I was running, I joined a track club and I ran a race and I won the race. And this woman came up to me and congratulated me and so forth. And she said, I have been the fastest runner since I was a teenager and I've never come in first in a race. She said, no matter how big my lead is, when I get to the finish line, I cannot cross the finish line first. I always have to slow down and let somebody pass me. She said, my whole life it's been that way. But yet lots of times I'm the fastest runner. And I should, but I can't. I can't do it. And I said, and she knew nothing about TBM. She knew nothing about me. It was the first time we met. And I said, are you open to a little experiment? And so she lay down and I did a procedure with her that literally didn't even take 90 seconds to do. And she was on next and she ran and she came in first place. And she came to me and she said, what did you do? I mean, her mind was just blown. We all went as a group afterwards to get coffee someplace, and she could not stop talking about it. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of things, and they're so simple, and we don't dig into people's pasts, into their psychological past. You don't have to. all that you have to do is just bring it to mind, and we have ways to moving through those things quickly.
Yeah, that's incredible. Just having kids, that's something that I use all the time on simple things such as test taking, or I have a dancer that's a daughter if she's nervous to go on stage one day, or she gets scared to do like a little trick, one that she's normally able to do, and it totally just clears out the block, which it's just really cool to see. So
she's doing awesome.
Yeah. So
she's got a secret weapon.
Yeah, she does.
For mom. I'm of the opinion every human being has a priceless contribution that they and they alone can make. Every human being. And it cannot be transferred. It won't just be delayed and done by someone else. It will never, ever happen. Every human being has a unique contribution that will rise all of humanity to some little degree. And that only when each human being is making their contribution, as a species, as society, as a community, do we efficiently progress. When people are on drugs, when people are disabled from illnesses, when people are psychologically disabled, etc., that's not happening. So for me, yeah, it's great to have different symptoms and so forth. I'll tell you, when you got back pain, nothing else matters, right? Like, we've all been in those experiences. I don't want to minimize that at all. And yes, TBM is amazing in those situations. But ultimately, why does healing exist? Why do we want to heal? Because we can make a difference, every one of us, and every one of us is needed. Every one of us matters, no matter what our socioeconomic status is, where we are, it doesn't matter. Every human being is priceless.
So would that be the urgency to choose into doing TBM and having this whole other form of medicine open to you?
No, the urgency is it's a Russian roulette to not. Every time you take a biomedicine, you have no idea what the effects are going to be. I don't care if it's the 178th time you've taken the exact same dose at the exact same time of day. You don't ever know. I'm going to throw my dad under the bus. I wrote something for my patients back in the 90s, what I want you to know about drugs. And in there, I shared a whole bunch of statistics that medical care is the number one cause of death in America. Has been, I did the original research in 1991. We published it through the International Coalition for Drug Awareness. And the Life Extension magazine, another writer for Life Extension magazine, did the research again in the early 2000s, and whose name is escaping me. Maybe it'll come back to me later. But that's an interesting thought. That medical care is the number one cause of death. When you add up adverse reactions, when you add up bed sores, when you add surgical mistakes, et cetera, you add all those things up, it's greater than heart disease, which is what's advertised as the number one killer. My dad had knee pain. He took a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, acetaminophen, Advil, I don't know, whatever he took. And he developed a stomach ulcer. As a result of the stomach ulcer, he developed serious blood loss and developed anemia. And he was using the bathroom and passed out and fell over the bathroom. My mom found him, took him to the hospital. I wasn't there. I don't know if they used an ambulance or not. I suspect so. and they inflated his stomach, which has a chance of death. You have to sign your life away for them to do that. Diagnosed the ulcer. He spent like a week in the hospital. They did their full antibiotic therapy and so forth. All these dominoes that led, and thankfully he didn't die. He absolutely could have died through that process. The ulcer was from the drugs, right? So about 2 weeks ago, I get a call from someone that my dad was with at the time, and said, I don't think your dad's going to make it. We'd like to bring him down to your home and see if you can help him. I'm like, of course, I'm here, bring him down. And what happened is some hygiene was neglected on his skin, and he developed a boil type of a thing, right? And it became quite painful for him. He went to a biomedical physician who said, let's just go ahead and cut it out. And you've got some others that we could probably take out too. Should we just do that? And he's like, sure. So they put him under general anesthesia to remove boils. By the way, I got operated on my ankle without anesthesia, right? Drills, screws, and so forth. I'm kind of hardcore that way, but I'm not going to let someone put me under. It would really take a lot for me to sign off on that. I'd probably have to be unconscious and someone else made the choice or something. I don't know. But at any rate, and then they put him on antibiotics. Some of the antibiotics are known neurotoxins. He had an adverse reaction to one of the antibiotics, and it triggered neuropathy, and he developed a spontaneous flaccid neurogenic bladder. What does that mean? That means his bladder died. It no longer contracted to expel urine. He no longer felt a full bladder, any urgency to urinate. And so he wasn't urinating, and if you don't urinate, you have a day to live. His neighbor, a couple decades ago, didn't urinate for 24 hours. I don't know what his situation was. Maybe it was a flaccid neurogenic bladder as well. It's a very common thing in diabetics. And his wife insisted he go to the hospital. He went to the hospital. He's fully alert, gets to the hospital. The damage that was done after the 24 hours so severe, they couldn't keep him alive, and he died in the hospital just hours after they got him there. So my dad, from the antibiotic, develops this flaccid neurogenic bladder, stops urinating, finally goes in, and they catheterize him and tell him he's going to need to catheterize for the rest of his life. He wasn't liking that. After a couple of weeks, we went back and said, is there anything else we can do? They said, well, there's a drug you can take that, might help, whatever. I don't know what they told him it would help him with. He took that, and then he started to hallucinate. And he is 86 years old, and his whole physiological status just began to spiral like an airplane going to the ground. And that's when I got called. And thankfully, we were able to clean all of that up and turn that around. His neurogenic bladder is probably 50% improved, I would say, within about a week of working with him here. But my mother, she died due to adverse drug reactions just about 1.5 years ago. For me, the urgency to Step into working to restore regulation and watch the symptoms melt away on their own. Out of that world where this scorched earth policy is taken to get rid of symptoms and you just take whatever comes with that Russian roulette, that the only winning move is not to play. For me, the urgency is that's not safe. The International Coalition for Drug Awareness is the reason that there is a black box warning on all antidepressants. What does that black box warning say? Suicide risk. Okay? Our organization got over 500 families to testify before the FDA. We finally got the FDA said, okay, we'll look at it. They got Columbia University look at it. We were just asking for it to be a warning for youth. Columbia University looked at it. They came back and they said, it's all ages. And we only wanted SSRIs, and they said, all antidepressants do this. Increase the risk of suicidality. It is too risky. That is the urgency in my mind.
Thank you for spending the time and effort. We've been working on this conversation for a really long time and being open to ask these questions so we can share them with the world and help those people who are wanting to make a difference in what they're doing and have an effect on those around them and promote connection and health and wellness. So thank you for taking the time and answering all of our questions today.
You're welcome. It's actually always been a dream of mine to do a podcast together with one of my children.
Yeah,
it's my honor. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So.